strange original fairy tales and other stories. Today we embark on a journey into the rich tapestry of Viking history with a full reading of an ancient Icelandic saga written in the 13th century, which chronicles the adventurous life of Erik Thorvaldsson, known as Erik the Red, and his family's pioneering exploration of Greenland and North America. Compiled from oral traditions, this saga offers us a glimpse into the world of Norse exploration, colonization, and the clash of cultures with indigenous peoples, known as Skrælings. Join me as we delve into tales of adventure, conflict, and survival, set against the backdrop of the harsh yet majestic landscapes of the North Atlantic. So, grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and immerse yourself in this captivating saga that continues to captivate readers with its timeless allure. Throughout this reading, we'll explore Erik the Red's daring exploits, the challenges faced by his family and followers, and the enduring legacy of Viking exploration. Let us begin our journey into a saga that embodies the spirit of adventure and discovery that defined an era. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest readings and historical explorations. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the Saga of Erik the Red. Chapter 1. From Aud the Deep-Minded and Vifil. There was a warlord named Olaf, who was called Olaf the White. He was the son of King Ingjald Helgason, Olafsson, Gudrodason, Halfdanason, the Whitebone, king of the upland people. Olaf raided as a Viking in the west and conquered Dublin in Ireland and the surrounding area. He became the king there. He married Aud the Deep-Minded, the daughter of Ketil Flatnose, Bjorn's son Buna, a distinguished man from Norway. Their son was named Thorstein the Red. Olaf fell in battle in Ireland, and then Aud and Thorstein went to the Hebrides. There Thorstein married Thurid, the daughter of Eyvind the Eastman, sister of Helgi the Lean. They had many children. Thorstein became a warlord. He allied with Earl Sigurd the Powerful, son of Eystein Glumra. They conquered Caithness and Sutherland, Ross and Moray, and more than half of Scotland. Thorstein became king there before the Scots betrayed him, and he fell in battle. Aud was in Caithness when she heard of Thorstein's fall. She then secretly built a gnar, a type of ship, in the forest, and when she was ready, she sailed to the Orkneys. There she married off Groa, Thorstein the Red's daughter. Groa was the mother of Grelad, who was married to Earl Thorfinn Skullsplitter. After that, Aud sought out Iceland. She had 20 free men on her ship. Aud arrived in Iceland and spent the first winter in Bjorn's haven with her brother Bjorn. Then Aud claimed all the land in the Dal region between the Daymeel River and Stream Run River. She lived at Hvam. She held prayers at Cross Knolls. There she raised crosses, for she was baptized and devout. With her came many noblemen who had been captured in Viking raids in the west and were called thralls. One of them was named Vifil. He was a man of noble birth and had been captured across the sea and was called a thrall before Aud freed him. And when Aud gave homesteads to her crew, Vifil asked why Aud did not give him a homestead like the other men. Aud said it would not matter, calling him noble wherever he might be. She gave him Vifilsdal, and he settled there. He had a wife, and their sons were named Thorbjorn and Thorgeir. They were promising men and grew up with their father. Chapter 2. Erik the Red discovered Greenland. There was a man named Thorvald. He was the son of Asvald Ulfsson, Oxen Thorisson. His son was named Erik the Red. They, father and son, left Jæren for Iceland due to some killings and settled on Hornstrandir and lived at Drangar. There, Thorvald passed away. Eric then married Thjodhild, the daughter of Jorund Ulfsson, and Thorbjorg Shipbreast, who was then married to Thorbjorn the South Icelander. Eric then moved north and cleared land in Haukadal and lived at Eirikstadir near Vatnshorn. Then Eric's slaves caused a landslide on Valthiof's farm at Valthiofstadir. Eyjolf the Foul, his kinsman, killed the slaves near Skide slopes above Vatnshorn. For this, Eric killed Eyjolf the Foul. He also killed Holmgang Hrafen at Leikskalar. Geirstein and Odd at Jorvi, Eyjolf's kinsman, laid charges against him. Then Eric was banished from Haukadal. He then claimed Brokey and Oxney and lived at Tradir in the southern isles the first winter. Then he lent Thorgest some setstokker, bench boards. Later, Eric went to Oxney and lived at Eirikstadir. Then he demanded the return of the setstokkar and did not get them. Eric went to Bridabolstad to retrieve the setstokkar, and Thorgest pursued him. They fought near the fence at Drangar. There Thorgest's 2 sons and some other men fell. After that, both parties held large gatherings. Styr supported Eric, as did Eyjolf from Sveini, Torbjorn Vifilsson, and the sons of Thorbrand from Alftafjord. Thorgest was supported by the sons of Thordgelir, Thorgeir from Hitardal, Aslak from Langadal, and his son Illugi. Eric and his men were outlawed at the Thorsnes assembly. He prepared a ship at Eiriksvag, and Eyjolf hid him in Demonarvag, while Thorgest and his men searched the islands for him. Thorbjorn, Eyjolf, and Styr accompanied Eric out to the islands, and they parted with great friendship. Eric told them he would repay their loyalty if he could, and if they needed his help. He told them that he intended to explore the land that Gunnbjorn, Ulf Krak's son, saw when he was driven westward across the sea and found Gunnbjarnarska. Eric said he would return to his friends if he found the land. Eric sailed from Snæfellsjökull. He landed by the glacier called Bleisaka. From there, he traveled south to see if there was any habitable land. He spent the first winter in Eiriksey near the middle of the eastern settlement. The following spring, he went to Eiriksfjord and settled there. That summer, he explored the western uninhabited area and gave many places names. He spent the second winter on Eriksholm near Hvarfsgnipa, and the third summer, he explored northward to Snæfell and into Hrafnsfjord. Then he felt he had reached the bottom of Eriksfjord. He returned and spent the third winter on Eiriksey at the mouth of Eriksfjord. The following summer, he went to Iceland and arrived in Breidafjord. He spent that winter with Ingolf at Holmlatar. In the spring, he and Thorgest fought, and Eric was defeated. After that, they reconciled. That summer, Eric went to settle the land he had found, which he called Greenland, saying that people would be attracted there if the land had a good name. Ari Thorgilsson says that in that summer, 35 ships sailed to Greenland from Breidafjord and Borgarfjord, but only 14 arrived. Some were driven back, and some were lost. This was 15 winters before Christianity was made law in Iceland. Eric later claimed Eiriksfjord and lived in Brattahlid. Chapter 3. Thorbjorn Vifilsson travels to Greenland. There was a man named Thorgeir Vifilsson who married Arnora, the daughter of Einar from Laugabrekka, Sigmundsson, Ketilsson Thistle, who had settled Thistilfjord. Einar's other daughter was named Hallveig. She married Thorbjorn Vifilsson, and they took land at Laugabrekka on Hellisvellir. Thorbjorn settled there and became a very distinguished man. He was a good farmer and had great wealth. Thorbjorn's daughter was named Gudrid. She was the fairest of women and a very capable person in all her actions. There was a man named Orm who lived at Arnarstapi. He had a wife named Haldis. Orm was a good farmer and a great friend of Thorbjorn, and Gudrid often stayed with him in foster care. There was a man named Thorgeir who lived at Thorgeirsfell. He was wealthy and had been a freedman. He had a son named Einar. Einar was a handsome and well-mannered man, and also very stylish. Einar was a trader among countries, and he did well in that. He spent his winters either in Iceland or Norway. Now it happened one autumn when Einar was in Iceland that he went with his goods along the Snæfell's coast to sell them. He came to Arnarstapi. Orm invited him to stay there, and Einar accepted because there was friendship between them. Einar's goods were brought into an outhouse. Einar unpacked his goods and showed them to Orm and the household, and offered Orm to take what he wanted. Orm accepted this and praised Einar for being a good merchant and a very fortunate man. While they were handling the goods, a woman came to the door of the outhouse. Einar asked Orm who the beautiful woman at the door was, saying, "I have not seen her here before." Orm answered, "That is Gudrid, my foster daughter, the daughter of Thorbjorn of Laugarbrekka." Einar said, "She must be a good match. Has anyone come to ask for her hand?" Orm answered, "Indeed, there have been suitors, but it is not easily done. It seems that both she and her father are choosy." "Well then," said Einar, "I intend to ask for her hand, and I would like you to broach the matter with Thorbjorn, her father, and do your best to bring it about. I will repay you with my full friendship if I succeed. Thorbjorn should see that such an alliance would be beneficial, for he is a very honorable man and has good standing, but I hear his wealth is somewhat depleted. I lack neither land nor wealth, and my father and I would be a great support to Thorbjorn if this marriage were arranged." Orm said, "I consider myself your friend, but I am not eager to approach this matter, for Thorbjorn is a proud and ambitious man." Einar insisted that the proposal be made. Orm said he would do as Einar wished. Einar then returned south until he came home. Some time later, Thorbjorn held an autumn feast, as was his custom, for he was a great man. Orm from Arnarstapi and many other friends of Thorbjorn came to the feast. Orm spoke with Thorbjorn and mentioned that Einar from Thorgeirsfell had recently been there and seemed a very promising man. Orm then put forward Einar's marriage proposal and said it would be beneficial in many ways. "It could be a great support to you, farmer, in terms of wealth." Thorbjorn replied, "I did not expect such words from you, that I would marry my daughter to a freedman's son. You must think my wealth is dwindling to offer such a suggestion, and she shall no longer stay with you if you consider her so unworthy of a good match." After that, Orm went home, and so did the other guests. Gudrid stayed with her father and spent the winter at home. In the spring, Thorbjorn hosted a feast for his friends, and many people attended, and it was a very good feast. At the feast, Thorbjorn called for attention and said, "I have lived here for a long time, and have experienced the goodwill and affection of the people. I consider our dealings to have gone well, but now my situation is becoming difficult due to a lack of movable wealth, although I have always been considered respectable. Now I would rather leave my farm than lose my honor. I plan to leave the country rather than disgrace my family, and to seek the promises of my friend Eric the Red, which he made when we parted in Breidafjord. I plan to go to Greenland this summer if things go as I wish." People were greatly surprised by this decision because Thorbjorn was well liked, but they knew that he had made up his mind and there would be no changing it. Thorbjorn gave gifts to the people, and the feast ended. Then everyone went home. Thorbjorn sold his lands and bought a ship that was in Hraunhafnaros. 30 people joined him on the journey. Among them were Orm from Arnarstapi and his wife, and other friends of Thorbjorn who did not want to part with him. They set sail, and when they were at sea, the wind died down. They became lost at sea, and the summer went poorly for them. Next, sickness struck their crew, and Orm and his wife Haldis, and half of their people, died. The sea began to rise, and they suffered great hardship and many kinds of misery, but they managed to reach Herjolfsnes in Greenland just before winter. There was a man named Thorkel who lived in Herjolfsnes. He was a very good farmer. He took in Thorbjorn and all his crew for the winter. Thorkel hosted them generously. Chapter 4, about Thorbjorg the seeress. At that time there was a great famine in Greenland. Those who had gone on hunting trips had caught little, and some had not returned at all. There was a woman in the settlement named Thorbjorg. She was a seeress and was called a little vulva, prophetess. She had had 9 sisters, all of whom were seeresses, but she alone was still alive. It was Thorbjorg's custom in the winter to go to feasts, and the men who were most curious to know their fate or the future would invite her. Since Thorkel was the most prominent farmer there, it seemed appropriate for him to find out when the famine would end. Thorkel invited the seeress to his home, and she was welcomed warmly, as was customary when receiving such women. A high seat was prepared for her, with cushions filled with hen feathers. When she arrived in the evening, and the man who had been sent to meet her saw her, she was dressed in a blue cloak, with stones set into it down to the hem. She wore a necklace of glass beads and a black lambskin hood lined with white catskin. She carried a staff with a brass knob and stones set into it. She had a belt of touchwood with a large pouch in which she kept the charms she needed for her prophecies. She wore calfskin shoes with long thongs and large tin buttons on the ends. She wore catskin gloves, white and lined with fur. When she came in, everyone felt it was their duty to greet her respectfully. She accepted the greetings according to how much she liked each person. Thorkel took her by the hand and led her to the seat prepared for her. Thorkel then asked her to look at his household, livestock and buildings. She spoke little about everything. In the evening the tables were set, and it is said that the seeress was served porridge made from kid's milk and prepared hearts from all kinds of animals available. She had a brass spoon and a knife with a bone handle and a broken tip. After the tables were cleared, Thorkel approached Thorbjorg and asked how she liked the household and the people's behavior, and how soon she might know what he and the others were most eager to learn. She said she would not answer until the next morning after she had spent the night there. The next morning, as the day advanced, she was provided with everything she needed to perform her seder, a type of Norse magic. She asked for women who knew the chant called Vardlakur, necessary for the seder. The women were not readily found. Then it was searched throughout the household to see if anyone knew it. Then Gudrid spoke up. "I am neither skilled in magic nor a prophetess, but my foster mother Haldis taught me in Iceland the chant called Vardlakur." Thorkel said, "Then you are fortunate." She replied, "This is something I intend not to help with because I am a Christian woman." Thorbjorg said, "It could be that you would help people here greatly, and you would be no worse a woman than before, and I will leave it to Thorkel to provide the items needed." Thorkel urged Gudrid, and she said she would do as he wished. The women formed a circle around the platform, and Thorbjorg sat on top. Gudrid then sang the chant so beautifully and well that everyone there thought they had never heard a song sung with a fairer voice. The seeress thanked her for the chant and said that many spirits who found it beautiful to hear had been summoned and were now willing to listen to them and offer their assistance, though they had previously refused. "Many things are now clear to me that were previously hidden, and many others as well. I can tell you, Thorkel, that this famine will not last longer than this winter, and the harvest will improve with the spring. The illness that has plagued you will also improve sooner than expected, and to you, Gudrid, I will repay you for the help you have given us. Your fate is now very clear to me. You will make a distinguished marriage here in Greenland. though it will not be long-lasting, for your path leads to Iceland, and from you will come a great and noble family line, shining with a brighter light than I can foresee clearly. And now, farewell, my daughter." After this, people approached the seeress, each asking what they were most curious about. She was good at her predictions, and what she said turned out mostly as expected. Afterward, she was sent for from another farm and went there. Then Thorbjorn was summoned because he did not want to stay at home while such sorcery was being practiced. The weather improved quickly, as Thorbjorn had predicted. Thorbjorn prepared his ship and sailed until he reached Brattahlid. Eirik received him warmly and said it was good that he had come. Thorbjorn stayed with him for the winter along with his household, while his crew members were lodged with farmers. The next spring, Eirik gave Thorbjorn land at Stockness, where a suitable farm was built, and he lived there afterward. Chapter 5. Leif the Lucky discovers Vinland. Eirik had a wife named Theodild, and with her he had 2 sons. One was named Thorstein, and the other Leif. Both were promising men. Thorstein stayed at home with his father and was considered the most amiable man in Greenland. Leif had sailed to Norway and was with King Olaf Tryggvason. When Leif sailed from Greenland in the summer, they were driven to the Hebrides. They started their journey late from there and stayed there for a long time during the summer. Leif took a liking to a woman named Thorgunna. She was a woman of high birth, and Leif understood that she was very knowledgeable. When Leif was preparing to leave, Thorgunna asked to go with him. Leif asked whether her relatives agreed. She said she did not care about that. Leif said he did not think it wise to bring a woman of such high birth to an unknown land, especially as they were few in number. Thorgunna replied, "It might not seem a better decision to you." "I will take my chances," said Leif. "Then I tell you," said Thorgunna, "that I will not go alone, and I am with child. I tell you this because of you. I guess that it will be a boy. Even if you do not care, I will raise the boy and send him to Greenland when he is able to travel with others. I believe that you will find the son as useful as the separation we now face will be difficult, but I intend to come to Greenland before it ends." Leif gave her a gold ring, a Greenland homespun cloak, and a belt. This boy came to Greenland and was named Thorgils. Leif acknowledged him as his son. Some people say that this Thorgils came to Iceland before the events at Froda. This Thorgils later stayed in Greenland, where his fate was notable until the end. Leif and his men sailed away from the Hebrides and arrived in Norway in the autumn. Leif went to the court of King Olaf Tryggvason. The king held him in high regard and saw that he was a well-mannered man. One day the king spoke to Leif and said, "Do you plan to go to Greenland this summer?" "I plan to," said Leif, "if it is your will." The king replied, "I believe it is good, and you should go there with my mission to proclaim Christianity." Leif said the king should decide, but he thought the mission would be difficult in Greenland. The king said he did not see anyone better suited for the task than Leif, and you will carry luck with you. "That will only be so," said Leif, "if I have your support." Leif then set sail and was out at sea for a long time, encountering lands he had not expected. There were self-sown wheat fields and vines growing there. There were trees called mosur, and they took samples of everything, including some trees large enough to be used in buildings. Leif found men on a shipwreck and brought them home. This showed his great magnanimity and nobility, as well as many other qualities when he brought Christianity to the land, and from then on he was called Leif the Lucky. Leif settled in Eirik's fjord and then went home to Brattahlid. He was well received by everyone there. He soon proclaimed Christianity throughout the land and the general faith, showing King Olaf Tryggvason's message and explaining the many wonders and great glory associated with this faith. Eirik was slow to change his beliefs, but Thjodild quickly converted and had a church built near the houses. This building was called Thjodild's Church. She and those who accepted Christianity prayed there. Thjodild would not have marital relations with Eirik after she converted, which displeased him greatly. Because of this, there was much talk about exploring the land that life had found. Thorstein Eiriksson, a wise and popular man, led the expedition. Eirik was also asked to join because people trusted his luck and foresight. He was reluctant, but did not refuse when his friends asked. They prepared the ship that Thorbjorn had brought, and 20 men were selected, bringing only their weapons and provisions. The morning Eirik set out, he took a chest with gold and silver and hid it. He then continued his journey, but fell from his horse, breaking ribs and injuring his shoulder. He told Thjodild that she should retrieve the treasure, as he considered it a payment for hiding it. They set sail from Eirik's fjord with great joy, feeling optimistic about their venture. They were long at sea and did not reach the desired destination. They sighted Iceland and found birds from Ireland. Their ship drifted at sea, and they returned in the autumn, tired and discouraged, arriving in Eirik's fjord at winter. Eirik said, "We were much more cheerful when we sailed out of the fjord this summer than we are now, but still, many good things remain." Thorstein replied, "It is a noble deed to find some good provision for all those now homeless here, and to secure them a place for the winter." Eirik said, "It is always true, as it is said, that one does not know until one has tried, and so it will be here. We will follow your plan." All those who had no other place to stay joined Eirik and Thorstein. They returned home to Brattahlid and stayed there for the winter. Chapter 6, about Thorstein Eiriksson. Now it is told that Thorstein Eiriksson proposed to Gudrid, and this was well received by both her and her father. Thus it was arranged. Thorstein married Gudrid, and the wedding took place in Brattahlid in the autumn. The feast went well, and many people attended. Thorstein had a farm in the western settlement at a place called Lysufjord. Another man named Thorstein also had a share in the farm. His wife was named Sigrid. Thorstein and Gudrid went to Lysufjord in the autumn to stay with his namesake. They were warmly welcomed and stayed there for the winter. A sickness struck their household early in the winter. The overseer, named Gardar, was not a well-liked man. He was the first to fall ill and die. Soon others followed one by one. Then Thorstein Eiriksson and Sigrid, the wife of the other Thorstein, became ill. One evening Sigrid wanted to go to the outhouse, which was opposite the main door. Gudrid accompanied her, and they looked towards the main door. Sigrid then spoke loudly. Gudrid said, "We have been careless and should return quickly to avoid the cold." Sigrid replied, "It is not safe now. The dead are outside the door, and I see your husband Thorstein among them. This is a dreadful sight." When this vision passed, she said, "Let us go back, Gudrid. I no longer see the dead." They returned inside, and before morning, Sigrid died. A coffin was made for her body. The same day, people planned to row out, and Thorstein led them to the shore. He took a different approach to fishing that day. Then Thorstein Eiriksson sent word to his namesake that he should come to him, saying it was not peaceful there, and that the housewife wanted to get up and lie under the covers with him. When he came inside, she was already on the bed. He took hold of her and laid an axe against her chest. Thorstein Eiriksson died near sunset. Thorstein, the farmer, asked Gudrid to lie down and sleep while he watched over the body during the night. She did so. Shortly after nightfall, Thorstein Eiriksson sat up and spoke, asking that Gudrid be called to him, saying he wanted to speak with her. God wills that this time be given to me to make amends." The farmer Thorstein went to Gudrid and woke her, asking her to sign herself with the cross and pray for God's help. He told her what Thorstein Eiriksson had said. "He wants to see you. You must decide what to do, for I cannot advise you either way." She answered, "It may be intended for some purpose that this strange event is remembered, and I trust God's protection will be with me. I will take the chance with God's mercy to meet him and hear what he wants to say, for I cannot avoid it if harm is to come. But I prefer that he does not wander further." Gudrid went to Thorstein and saw him weeping. He whispered some words in her ear, which only she knew, but he spoke aloud so that everyone could hear, saying that blessed were those who kept their faith, as it brought help and mercy, though many kept it poorly. This practice of burying people in unconsecrated ground with little ceremony is not good. I want to be moved to the church, along with the others who have died here, and Gardar should be burned on a pyre as soon as possible, for he causes all the hauntings that have happened here this winter. He also spoke to her about his own affairs and foretold her future, advising her to avoid marrying Greenlanders and to donate their wealth to the church and the poor. Then he fell back again. Since Christianity came to Greenland, the custom had been to bury people where they died, in unconsecrated ground. A stake was placed at the chest of the deceased, and later, when priests arrived, the stake was pulled out, holy water was poured in, and prayers were said, even if much time had passed. The bodies of those named Thorstein were moved to the church in Eirik's fjord, where priests conducted the proper ceremonies. Eirik took Gudrid in as his own daughter. Soon after, Thorbjorn died, and Gudrid inherited all his wealth. Eirik took her into his care and looked after her well. Chapter 7. Thorfinn Karlsefni marries Gudrid. There was a man named Thorr who lived at Hofda on Hofdastrand. He was married to Thorgerd, daughter of Thorir Him and Fridgerd, daughter of Kjarval, king of Ireland. Thorr was the son of Bjorn Byrdusmjor, son of Hroald Spine, son of Aslak, son of Bjorn Ironside, son of Ragnar Lodbrok. They had a son named Snorri. He was married to Thorhild Ryupa, daughter of Thord Gellir. Their son was Thord Horsehead. Thorfinn Karlsefni was the son of Thord. Thorfinn's mother was named Thorun. Thorfinn was a merchant and was considered a good traveller. One summer, Karlsefni prepared his ship and planned to go to Greenland. Snorri Thorbrandsson from Alftafjord went with him, and there were 40 men on the ship. A man named Bjarni Grimolfsson from Breidafjord and another named Thorhall Gamlason from the East Fjords also prepared their ship that summer and planned to go to Greenland. They too had 40 men on their ship. Karlsefni and his companions set sail with these two ships as soon as they were ready. There is no account of how long their voyage was, but it is told that both ships arrived at Eirik's fjord in the autumn. Eirik rode to the ships with other locals. A lively trading session ensued. The ship captains offered Eirik whatever goods he wanted. Eirik showed his generosity by inviting the crews of both ships to stay with him for the winter in Brattahlid. The merchants accepted and thanked him. Their goods were brought to Brattahlid, where there was ample storage for their possessions. There was nothing they lacked, and the merchants were very pleased with their winter stay. As Christmas approached, Eirik became increasingly sad and less cheerful than usual. One day, Karlsefni spoke to Eirik and said, "Are you troubled, Eirik? People notice that you are less cheerful than usual. You have treated us with great generosity, and we are obliged to repay your kindness in any way we can. Now tell us what troubles you." Eirik answered, "You are generous and noble. I do not worry that our exchange will be unfair. Rather, I fear that when you leave, it will be said that you had no worse Christmas than the one you spent with Eirik the Red, in Brattahlid, Greenland. "It will not be so, my friend," said Karlsefni. "We have both malt and grain on our ship. Take as much as you want and host a grand feast." Eric accepted, and a Christmas feast was prepared, which was very splendid, so much so that people thought they had rarely seen such magnificence in a poor country. After Christmas, Karlsefni broached the subject of marriage with Eric concerning Gudrid, believing that he would have authority over her. Eric responded positively, saying that she would follow her destiny and that he had heard only good things about Karlsefni. Thus it ended with Thorfinn becoming betrothed to Gudrid. The feast was extended and their wedding was celebrated, and they stayed in Brattahlid for the winter. Chapter 8. The Expedition of Karlsefni to Vinland. In Brattahlid, there were many discussions about exploring Vinland the Good, and it was said that good opportunities awaited there. Thus, Karlsefni and Snorri prepared their ship to explore the land in the spring. Joining this expedition were Bani and Thorr with their ship and the company that accompanied them. There was a man named Thorvard, who was married to Freydis, the illegitimate daughter of Eric the Red. He also joined them, as did Thorvald, the son of Eric, and Thorr, who was called the Hunter. He had been with Eric for a long time, serving as his hunter in the summers and steward in the winters. He was a large and strong man, dark and fierce-looking, quiet and ill-tempered, and often incited Eric to wrongdoing. He was poorly Christianized. He was well known in the wilderness. He joined the ship with Thorvard and Thorvald. They used the ship that Torbjorn had brought. They had a total of 40 men and 100 when they sailed to the western settlement and from there to Bear Island. From there, they sailed south for 2 days. Then they saw land and sent out a boat to explore it. They found large and numerous slabs of rock, 12 ells wide. There were many foxes there. They named the place Helluland, Slabland. From there, they sailed for 2 days, and then the land turned south. They found a forested land with many animals. There was an island to the south of it. They killed a bear there and named the island Bear Island, and the land Markland, Forest Land. They sailed south along the land for a long time and came to a promontory. The land lay to the east. There were long beaches and sandy shores. They rowed to the land and found a ship's keel on the promontory and named it Keelness. They also called the beaches Wonder Strands because it took a long time to sail by them. Then the land became indented with bays. They kept the ships in one bay. King Olaf Tryggvason had given life to Scottish people. The man's name was Haki, and the woman's name was Hekja. They were faster than animals. These people were with Karlsefni on the ship. When they had sailed past Wonderstrands, they let the Scots ashore and told them to run south and explore the land and return before 3 days had passed. They wore a type of clothing called kjafal. It was made with a hood at the top and open sides, no sleeves, and it was fastened between the legs with a button and clasp. Otherwise, they were bare. They waited for that time. When they returned, they each carried in their hand a bunch of grapes and an ear of self-sown wheat. They went aboard the ship, and then they sailed on their way. They sailed into a fjord. There was an island outside it. There were strong currents around it. They called it Stream Island. There were so many eider ducks on the island that one could hardly walk without stepping on eggs. They named the fjord Stream Fjord. They unloaded their goods from the ships and prepared to stay there. They had all kinds of livestock with them. The land was beautiful. They did not explore much further. They stayed there for the winter, and nothing significant happened during the summer. The fishing became scarce, and there was a food shortage. Then Thorr the Hunter disappeared. They had previously prayed to God for food, but their needs were not met as quickly as they had hoped. They searched for Thorhall for 3 days and found him on a cliff. He lay there looking up at the sky, with his mouth and nose wide open and chanting something. They asked why he was there. He said it was none of their concern. They asked him to come home with them, and he did so. Shortly afterward, a whale appeared, and they went to it and cut it up. No one recognized what kind of whale it was. When the cooks boiled it, everyone ate, and all became ill. Then Thorhall said, "Redbeard, Thorr, has proven more helpful than your Christ. I have received this for my poem about Thorr, my patron. He has rarely failed me." When people realized this, they threw the whale back into the sea and entrusted their fate to God. Then the weather improved, and they were able to fish, and they had no shortage of food after that, for there was game in the land, eggs on the island, and fish in the sea. Chapter 9. About Thorhall the Hunter. It is said that Thorhall the Hunter wanted to go north past Wonderstrands and Keelness to explore Vinland, while Karlsefni wanted to go south along the land. Thorhall prepared his ship near the island, and only 9 men went with him, while the rest of the group stayed with Karlsefni. When Thorhall was drawing water into his ship and drank, he recited this verse: "The poets said I would get the best drink here. I am ridiculed before the people. I must bear the water of a helmet for my feast, although I would rather have wine." And when they were ready, they hoisted the sail. Then Thorhall recited, "Let us return to where our countrymen are. Let us leave the broad seaways to those who mock us, while the swells lift our ship, and let us sail back to Wonderstrands." Then they sailed north past Wonderstrands and Keelness, and intended to sail west. Then a westerly wind arose and drove them up to Ireland, where they were beaten and enslaved, and Thorhall lost his life there, according to what merchants have said. Chapter 10. Karlsefni's stay in Vinland. Now it is to be told about Karlsefni that he sailed south along the land with Snorri and Bani and their people. They sailed for a long time until they came to a river that flowed from the land into a lake and then into the sea. There were large sandbanks there, and it was not possible to enter the river except at high tide. Karlsefni and his men sailed into the estuary and called it Hop. They found fields of wild wheat, where there were lowlands and vines everywhere. There were hills. Every stream was full of fish. They dug pits where the sea met the land, and when the tide went out, holy fish, halibut, were left in the pits. There were many animals in the woods of all kinds. They stayed there for half a month, enjoying themselves and not being disturbed. They had brought their livestock with them. One morning early, when they looked around, they saw a large number of skin-covered boats, with staves waving on the boats, and it seemed as if they were waving in a way of greeting, moving them in circles. Then Karlsefni said, "What might this mean?" Snorri Thorbrandsson answered him, "It may be a sign of peace, so let's raise a white shield and go to meet them." And so they did. They rowed towards them and marveled at these people who came ashore. They were dark men, ill-looking, with coarse hair on their heads. They were large-eyed and had broad cheeks. They stayed for a while, marveling at the strangers, then rowed away and south around the headland. Karlsefni and his men had built their houses up from the lake, some near the lake and some further away. They stayed there that winter, and there was no snow, and their livestock went freely in the fields. Chapter 11. Battle with the Skraelings. When spring came, they saw one morning a large number of skin-covered boats rowing south around the headland, so many that it seemed as if coal had been sprinkled before hop. Each boat had a waving stave. Karlsefni and his men took up their shields, and when they met, they began trading. The native people wanted red cloth the most. They offered in return skins and grey pelts. They also wanted to buy swords and spears, but Karlsefni and Snorri forbade this. Instead, the Skraelings took red cloth in span's length for grey pelts and tied it around their heads. Thus, trading continued for a while. When the red cloth began to run out, they cut it into smaller pieces, no wider than a finger's breadth, yet the Skraelings still offered the same amount or more for it. A bull belonging to Karlsefni ran out of the woods and bellowed loudly. This frightened the Skraelings, and they ran to their boats and rowed away south along the coast. They were not seen for 3 weeks. After this time, they saw a large number of Skraeling boats coming from the south, as if driven by a strong current. All the staves were now waving counterclockwise, and the Skraelings were all howling loudly. Karlsefni and his men raised a red shield. The Skraelings landed, and a fierce battle ensued. The Skraelings had slingshots. Karlsefni and his men saw that the Skraelings raised up on poles a large ball, nearly the size of a sheep's belly, bluish in color. This ball was hurled from the pole onto Karlsefni's men, making a terrible noise when it landed. This frightened Karlsefni and his men so much that they fled up along the river, as it seemed that the Skraelings were attacking from all sides. They did not stop until they reached some cliffs and made a stand there. Freydis came out and saw that Karlsefni and his men were retreating. She called out, "Why do you run away from such pitiful foes, brave men that you are, when you could slaughter them like cattle? If I had weapons, I believe I could fight better than any of you." They did not heed her words. Freydis wanted to follow them, but lagged behind because she was pregnant. She followed them into the woods, and the Skraelings pursued her. She found a dead man before her, Thorbrand Snorrason, with a flat stone in his head. His sword lay beside him. She picked it up and prepared to defend herself. The Skraelings came at her, but she pulled out her breast from under her clothes and slapped it with the sword. This terrified the Skraelings, and they ran back to their boats and rowed away. Karlsefni and his men found her and praised her luck. 2 of Karlsefni's men had fallen, but many Skraelings had been killed. They were overpowered and returned to their camp to tend their wounds and discuss what kind of force had attacked them. It seemed to them that the Skraelings' army was large, but mostly an illusion. The Skraelings found a dead man and an axe lying beside him. One of them picked up the axe and struck a tree with it, and they all marveled at its sharpness. Then one of them struck a stone with it, and the axe broke. Seeing this, they deemed the axe useless and discarded it. Karlsefni and his men realized that although the land had good qualities, it would always be plagued by fear and strife from the inhabitants. They decided to leave and return to their own land. They sailed north along the coast and found 5 Skraelings in skin boats sleeping near the shore. They had with them animal marrow mixed with blood. Karlsefni and his men thought these might have been banished from their land. They killed them. Then they found a promontory with many animals. The promontory looked as if it were covered with manure, because the animals lay there at night. Now they returned to Straumfjord and found all the provisions they needed there. Some say that Bani and Gudrid stayed there with 30 men and did not go further, while Karlsefni and Snorri went south with 40 men and stayed at Hop no longer than 2 months and returned the same summer. Karlsefni then went on one ship to look for Thorhall the hunter, while the other parties stayed behind. They sailed north around Kjalarnes and encountered strong westerly winds with the land to port. They saw only desolate wilderness and almost no clearings. They sailed for a long time, and a river flowed down from the land from the east into the west. They entered the river mouth and lay to the southern bank. Chapter 12. Departure from Vinland. One morning, as Karlsefni and his men looked up at the clearing, They saw something shining and called out. It moved, and it turned out to be a one-legged creature which hurried down to the bank of the river where they lay. Thorvald Eiríksson was sitting at the rudder, and the one-legged creature shot an arrow into his intestines. Thorvald pulled out the arrow and said, "Fat around the intestines. We have found a fine land, but we will hardly enjoy it." Thorvald died from this wound a little later. The one-legged creature ran away southward. Karlsefni and his men pursued it and saw it from time to time. The last they saw of it was when it jumped into a fjord. Then they returned. One of the men recited this verse: "Chase men." Well, true it was. A one-legged man down to the strand, but a strange man tested the race, hard and fast. "Here, Karlsefni." They then left and went northward again, and believed they had seen one-legged land. They did not want to risk their lives any further. They reckoned that the mountains they saw at Hopp were the same as those they found now, and that it was about the same distance from Straumfjord on both sides. They spent the third winter at Straumfjord. People roamed about a lot, and there were disputes over women, with unmarried men trying to take the wives of married men, causing great unrest. Snorri, Karlsefni's son, was born that first autumn and was 3 years old when they left. As they sailed away from Vinland, they encountered southerly winds and came to Markland, where they found 5 Skraelings, 1 bearded, 2 women, and 2 children. Karlsefni and his men took the children, but the others escaped, sinking into the ground. They brought the 2 boys with them, baptized them, and taught them the language. The boys' mother was named Vetildi, and their father Uvegi. The boys said that 2 kings ruled the Skraelings, one named Avaldemon and the other Avaldidida. They claimed there were no houses in their land. People lived in caves or holes. They also said there was another land opposite their own, where people wore white clothes, carried poles with cloths attached, and shouted loudly. It was believed to be either Hvitra Manaland, white men's land, or Great Island. Karlsefni and his men returned to Greenland and stayed with Eric the Red for the winter. Chapter 13. The Fate of Bjarni Grimolfsson. Bjarni Grimolfsson was sailing in the Irish Sea when they encountered sea worms that chewed through the ship's wood, causing it to sink rapidly. They had a boat coated with seal tar, which sea worms cannot penetrate. They climbed into the boat but realized it could not hold all of them. Bjarni said, "Since the boat cannot hold more than half of us, we must draw lots to decide who goes into the boat, as this cannot be based on rank." Everyone agreed it was nobly offered, and no one opposed it. They drew lots, and Bjarni was among those chosen to go into the boat with half of the men, as it could not hold more. As they boarded the boat, an Icelander who had accompanied Bjarni from Iceland said, "Do you intend to part from me here, Bjarni?" Bjarni replied, "It must be so." The man said, "You promised my father you would not part from me when I left Iceland with you, and now you are abandoning me." Bjarni responded, "It shall not be so. Come into the boat, and I will return to the ship, for I see you are eager to save your life." Bjarni then climbed back into the sinking ship, and the other man boarded the boat. The boat and its occupants reached Dublin in Ireland and told their story. Most people believe that Bjarni and those who remained on the ship perished in the sea of worms, as no further news was ever heard of them. Chapter 14. Karlsefni and Gudrid travelled to Iceland. The following summer, Karlsefni and Gudrid travelled to Iceland and settled at Reyniness. His mother felt that he had made a poor choice in a wife and did not stay with them the first winter. But when she got to know Gudrid and realized she was a great woman, she returned home, and they got along well. Snorri Karlsefnissen's daughter was Halfrid, mother of Bishop Thorlak Runolfsson. They had a son named Thorbjorn. His daughter was named Thorun, mother of Bishop Bani. Snorri Karlsefnissen's son was Thorgeir, father of Ingvild, mother of Bishop Brand the Elder. And thus ends this story. And that concludes our journey through the Saga of Eric the Red. From the shores of Iceland to the rugged landscapes of Greenland, we've explored the epic tale of Eric the Red and his family's saga of exploration and survival. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Viking history and the rich narratives that continue to inspire us today. The Saga of Eric the Red reminds us of the bravery, resilience, and curiosity of the Norse explorers who shaped the course of history. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. If you've enjoyed this reading, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Your engagement helps support my channel and encourages me to bring more tales to life. Subscribe to stay tuned for more readings and explorations into the captivating world of storytelling. Until next time, may your journeys be filled with discovery and wonder. Again, thank you, and I will see you all again very soon.